Clips, clips.
And remember, citizens, always subscribe. Hit the notification bell as well. And $19.95 plus shipping and handling will keep you out of hell.
Thing for the Prime Minister to do. It's worth mentioning, just as context to this, the Westminster normally winds down around this sort of point, that summer holidays have started for MPs. I'm sure they tell you one on holidays, but MPs aren't around here just now. So the government was starting to wind down a bit after the election campaign. It's clearly winding back up now to have this press conference to say to people, this is why we're worried about the situation that's developing with these different protests.
Nick, I'm just
this is what we think.
Because Sir Keir Starmer is about to speak. Let's go straight to it. We are clearly having some issues there with receiving the sound from Downing Street. We will
with the families at the heart of this.
Clearly.
Their pain is unimaginable. And so I call on everyone to give them, and indeed the wider community at Southport, the space to grieve. And time for the authorities in Merseyside to do their job. There will be a time for questions, and we will make sure that the victims and families in Southport are at the heart of that process. That's the very least that we owe these families. But we also owe them justice. So while there's a prosecution that must not be prejudiced, for them to receive the justice that they deserve, the time for answering those questions is not now. And I remind everyone that the price for a trial that is prejudiced is ultimately paid by the victims and their families who are deprived of the justice that they deserve. Let me now turn to the actions of a tiny, mindless minority in our society. Because in the aftermath of this attack, the community of Southport had to suffer twice. A gang of thugs got on trains and buses, went to a community that is not their own, a community grieving the most horrific tragedy.
I agree with
and then proceeded to throw bricks at police officers who just 24 hours earlier had been having to deal with an attack on children in their community. Their community. And make no mistake, whether it's in Southport, London or Hartlepool, these people are showing our country exactly who they are. Mosques targeted because they're mosques. Flares thrown at the statue of Winston Churchill. A Nazi salute at the cenotaph. And so I've just held a meeting with senior police and law enforcement leaders where we've resolved to show who we are. A country that will not allow understandable fear to curdle into division and hate in our communities, and that will not permit, under any circumstances, a breakdown in law and order on our streets. Because let's be very clear about this. It's not protest, it's not legitimate, it's crime, violent disorder, an assault on the rule of law and the execution of justice. And so, on behalf of the British people, who expect their values and their security to be upheld, we will put a stop to it. I want to thank all of the police officers across the country who have already, as they do so often, stood up to intimidation and violence in the past few days, and indeed throughout the summer. And let me be clear, the meeting this afternoon was not about pointing the finger of blame. That is not how this government of service conducts its business, because it doesn't work. Rather, This was a meeting to pull together our response, a response both to the immediate challenge, which is clearly driven by far-right hatred, but also all violent disorder that flares up, whatever the apparent cause or motivation. We make no distinction. Crime is crime, and so to that end, I can announce today that following this meeting, we will establish a national capability across police forces to tackle violent disorder. These thugs are mobile, they move from community to community, and we must have a policing response that can do the same.
How'd you like them apples, folks? Tommy Robinson's knuckle-dragging army and the bullshit that they've done over the last couple of days has now gave the political leverage to the ruling class, the ruling political class, to make up a new unit. It's called the fuck you knuckle dragger unit. They can go through fucking schemes everywhere, aka housing projects and other people who don't speak proper English. And how do you like that? I mean, it's almost like it's a setup. I mean, imagine what Nigel Farage would be doing right now. Imagine what Nigel Farage is going to do with the train wreck that he carries over with these brown shirts. What did Hitler have the brown shirts in it? Fucking beautiful.
Shared intelligence, wider deployment of facial recognition technology, and preventative action, criminal behaviour orders to restrict their movement.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, knuckle draggers.
Before they can even board a train. In just the same way that we do.
Yeah, it's going to be like Total Recall, man. You're going to have like fucking everything's good. Your bits are going to get scanned before you even get on a train. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, you fucking knuckle dragging fucking idiots.
With football hooligans. And let me also say to large social media companies and those who run them, violent disorder clearly whipped up online, that is also a crime. It's happening on your premises, and the law must be upheld everywhere. That is the single most important duty of government. Service rests on security, and we will take all necessary action to keep our streets safe. I'll now take a number of questions from the media. I'm going to start with Alex from BBC.
Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed. Alex Forsyth, BBC News. Can I ask, how concerned are you that the violence that we've seen may spread? Are you providing extra police resources? Are you preparing any clampdown on the far-right groups that are being blamed for this? And indeed, if you are, how can you, given that they're often very disparate? And if I may...
Well, who are you going to blame? Are you going to blame Britain first? Are you going to blame Tommy Robinson? Are you going to blame the Knights Templar? Are you going to blame all these little factionary groups that all came from the BNP? It's almost as if they're working in coordination, but hiding behind like fucking different names. It's crazy, innit? I'm a conspiracy theorist. Is it not obvious what's happening? I need to spelled it.
Are you satisfied with the way the BBC's handled the Hugh Edwards case? Thank you.
Yeah, well, Alex, in relation to the violence that we've seen, the whole point on pulling together the meeting today was to have a coordinated response. The clear message from police and law enforcement is not that they need more powers. I think we have to wean ourselves off the idea that the only response is to pass more legislation every time we have a challenge in front of us. It's to use the existing powers that we've got, pulling together the intelligence, the data, making sure that that is being shared across police forces, and that as these groups sort of bounce from chief constable to chief constable around the country, we have the same response, robust response to them, and that we're clear that this is violent disorder, it's not protest. And that needs to be the starting position of the policing response to it. In relation to Hugh Edwards, look, I'm shocked and appalled, I'm sure, as everybody is in relation to this. The Culture Secretary is meeting the Director General of the BBC later on today. Thank you, Alex. I'm going to try and wean people off the 2 or 3 questions in one, if I may, because otherwise we just won't get through. I've got actually Paul from Channel 4 next.
Hi, Sir Keir. You mentioned the national capability across all police forces. We've spoken to your new Labour MP in Hartlepool today, and he said that Cleveland Police was simply overwhelmed. They don't have the number of police officers to deal with what they had to deal with. So will you be fast-tracking the recruitment of more police officers? Will what you're announcing today...
So are we witnessing the violent takeover of power by the far right in this country? While all shouting about democracy and these people hate us for our freedoms and all that shit. Because they can't get elected because they don't have popular support. So their other option is to take to the streets and try to do a violent takeover, just like Maidan. Or Euromaidan, or whatever the fucking call it. I call it Maidan.
Actually increase the number of police officers on the street.
Too much RT, I think.
Well, we've already made a commitment to increasing police numbers. That's a commitment we made into the general election, and particularly police officers to work in neighbourhood policing. And that did come up in the meeting today in terms of the capability that's needed. But look, Paul, to be frank, what happens in the next few weeks matters, and that isn't a question on its own of recruitment, which takes longer. It is a question of coordinating the response, making sure the capability that we've got to share intelligence, share data, have a coordinated response, and to act as quickly as possible in cases so that arrests are followed swiftly by charging. It is an attempt to pull that together. Thank you. I've got Shihab from ITV.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Shihab Khan from ITV News. Prime Minister, how do you stop the far right from hijacking issues, especially when so many members of those groups often say they are being influenced by charismatic leaders who are often pushing for the division that you say?
Who's he talking about, charismatic
second quick question,
leaders?
if I may. British Muslims up and down the country would have
lightning
seen
one
these
hand
riots
and a
or
canopy in the
demonstrations,
other.
whatever
Who
you like
do
to
they
call them,
shit?
unfold. They've seen mosques
Shouting
get attacked.
freedom and save
They've
our
watched
babies.
as shops have been looted. There have been chants which some would say are grossly offensive. Partly this has happened because of misinformation. They now say they feel unsafe. What is your message to the British Muslim community, and what are you willing to do to make sure they feel safe in their own
It's
home?
hilarious how they
Well,
respond.
taking both parts of that, I
People
think it is
pointing out
really
that
important
social
to
media,
emphasise
the sewer
over and
pits of
over
social
again
media is used to curry
the
people's
price
favour. And it's
paid
like, fake news,
for
fake
those
news.
that
Just
put
made you
out
so confused you didn't
misinformation
know what way was up.
and interfere
It's
in
sad.
the work that the authorities are trying to do
sad.
in Southport. The price is paid ultimately
Genuinely bona fide.
by the mums and dads who are grieving their children. Because if there isn't a fair trial that gives them the justice they demand, they are the ones that are going to suffer the most.
They're going to walk
So
away
nobody but
fucking
nobody should
scot-free
pretend
because all the windy
that they're
liquor's
speaking
online.
for those families when they involve themselves in activity like this. Because they are putting what is now the single most important thing for those families, which is to grieve properly and to have the justice to which they are entitled.
Nah, they don't give
And
a
that's
flying
why
shit about
this
that.
is so important. In relation to the Muslim community, look, me be very
just
clear. I will
spread
take every step that's
muzzy
necessary
hate.
to keep you safe. And that's why I said what I said about mosques being attacked because they're mosques. The far right is showing who they are. We have to show who we are in response to that, and that's why we pulled together this response this afternoon to try and coordinate and make sure that as we face the next few days and weeks, we have the strongest possible response in order to ensure that there is safety for all of our citizens, including those Muslims who will see, as you rightly say, attacks on their mosques because they're mosques. Thank you. I've got John from Sky.
Thank you. John Craig from Sky News. You've talked about better coordination.
Craig!
Clearly,
Not
that's
Craig!
one of the purposes of this meeting. How concerned are you about perhaps apparent inconsistencies of approach by police forces? For example, 4 arrests in Southport, over 100 here. Different groups being treated differently, whether it's far left, far right, as some have suggested. Resources you've mentioned, smaller forces not being able to cope. We saw, didn't we, in Southport that Merseyside had to call in help from other forces. You've said no to extra police powers, but what about banning some of these far right groups, as Angela Rayner has suggested?
Well, look, in relation to the inconsistency, I don't think you can simply measure the number of arrests and say there's an inconsistency, because that will depend event by event. But look, yes, this afternoon was an attempt
that makes all these groups
to pull
go away.
together a national response so that that consistency, that support is there, and the sharing of intelligence and data. That's not a criticism of any of the forces that are trying to deal with difficult situations as they arise on their patch, but it is to give them the support that they need more quickly so that they can react more robustly. In relation to preventive measures, one of the issues that came up this morning was, this afternoon, is criminal behaviour orders, which can be attached to convictions for these sorts of offences, which then give the police and the authorities the ability to put their arms around and have a tighter grip of those that have already shown their true colours and being convicted. And I would personally like to see more use of those orders in the same way that they're used in football hooligan cases to stop people travelling, identify and prevent their patterns of behaviour. Because these are not people who are going to protest. You don't go to protest with a rock in your hand. You go to commit violent disorder. And we need to be really clear about that. And I think those orders would help us in the preventative space. Thank you very much. I've got Jason from the Mail.
Thanks, PM. Do you welcome the decision to name the suspect in this case, apparently taken to end some of the disinformation? And this is a pretty unusual summit for August. People are going on holiday now. Are you worried about we could be facing a sort of summer of riots?
Well, firstly, on the naming of the individual, that's a matter, obviously, for the court. A decision's been taken today, so that is now in the public domain. I won't say more about that because
they've done that because of the knuckle draggers, man. Couldn't you understand what a legal process is and how fucking
my
putting out names and faces that are not real out there and
I have seen this in other cases. The price for a trial that goes wrong is paid by the family and friends and victims
so the
of crime.
Judge felt pressure
I can't imagine
to release the dude's name. So that fucking all the
on in this case, if there was anything that got in the way of
knuckle dragging
trial
everything's a brown man in the boat's fault.
Look, in relation to what happens over the next
Danny
few
Tongo's
weeks
video was hilarious.
I
mean, if it was a brown man in the boat, I mean, there's going to be, even if it wasn't a brown man in the boat,
deliberate.
What kind of protest you're letting your hair,
got out of hand.
It is a group of individuals
who are absolutely bent on violence. And that's why it's important, I think, to pull together the senior police and law enforcement leaders, as we did today, to ensure that that is met with the most robust response in the coming days and weeks. I've got Aubrey from The Times.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You said that violent disorder is being whipped up online. What are you going to do to combat that spread of disinformation? Are you going to haul in social media companies?
If you turned on Twitter, I don't even fucking turn on Facebook anymore, man. YouTube's a sewer pit, but they're putting a good lot of filters, but it fucks up the normal people and just people want to have jibber jabber. TikTok's a minefield as well, man. You can't talk about fucking Toxic Tommy on Toxic Tommy. He's not a hero, gonna bring the country down to zero. The social medias are fucked, y'all. But like, batter in and go and go into a circle jerk in social media. People will tell you what you want to hear. You will find places. They will tell you you're great. Shit. That's not what I wanted to listen to. Mute that shit up.
Could you restart the rapid rebuttal unit in Whitehall? And what is your message to Nigel Farage,
we're getting a
who
new
obviously
judge
asked this
Dredd
week
unit,
whether the truth
so
is
we're
being
getting
withheld? Do you think that was
more
responsible?
border control
In relation
and
to
more
the platform
more
providers,
Judge Dredd
some of it
units
isn't as
that are
complicated
like
as
federal.
it
It's going to
may
be like the
first seem.
feds.
So
there's going
inciting
to be no
violence
jurisdiction for the
online is a
local
criminal
cops
offence.
because these motherfuckers trying to police these
And
fucking
that is not a
no-neck
matter of free
motherfuckers
speech. It
are
is a
going to be
criminal
bouncing
offence.
up and down the UK
Clearly,
with
in
no
relation to
fucking
platform
boundaries.
providers,
Just like they've done up here in the
there's a balance
UK.
to be
We
struck.
used to have separation of
Social media
power,
platform providers,
police-wise
it's an
up here,
amazing
and
opportunity
then done away
that
with
we
that
all
and get
enjoy
Super Police
as a
Force
country that is
Scotland.
very
So
important
now
to
we're
us,
going to have a
that
wee
these
fucking
platforms are
hang me
there
up in that.
to be used for the
So
great
it's all part
opportunities
of
that
the
they
deep state
provide.
Illuminati
There is also a
plan.
responsibility that goes with it. That's a space for a mature conversation to take place. In relation to the comments of others, look, I'm not going to stand here and cast judgment on what others are saying. I know what I'm saying, and I know why I'm saying it very, very clearly, which is my focus, whenever I'm confronted with any questions about this, is on the families and victims of those, particularly in Southport, who were so affected by this. I would also add the police officers. I had the privilege of going up the day after this incident to speak to the police officers who had had to deal in responding, the first responders to this. Remarkably but unsurprisingly, they were back on duty. I was able to thank them for what they had done, but I'm not going to pretend to you that they weren't affected by what they had to witness, what they'd had to deal with. They said to me, as they always do, I was simply doing my job, and of course they were, but doing your job, you know, there's no way what happened to them or what they had to endure, had to respond to, was anything other than extraordinarily challenging. And I think that if we all start with a clear focus on the victims, their families, and the police officers who had to respond to this horrific attack, that will be a good template or framework for the discussion of all of these matters. I've got Rowena from The Guardian.
Rowena Mason from The Guardian. Nigel Farage is the leader of Reform. He did very well, obviously, in the election, and he's been accused of spreading conspiracy theories about the Southport tragedy and his response to it. Is it enough to say that you just won't comment on what he's said, given that some people, including a former police chief, have linked his comments to the violence that broke out in the riots?
Look, I'm not going to run a sort of running commentary on the motives of other people. What I am saying is my focus is on the families, the victims who are at the heart of this, and I think that that should be the focus for everybody. Anybody who says or does anything that impedes their ability to get the justice that they deserve cannot claim to be acting in their best interests, because they're not. Thank you. And I've got John from the Mirror.
Hello, thank you. What consequences will there be if social media firms do fail to take action?
Well, I think there's a discussion to be had, and it is a balance, and it needs to be the right balance, because social media is a fantastic opportunity, but it also carries responsibility, and that's the mature discussion that we've had. What we've done today is have a discussion with law enforcement and the police, which is about pulling things together for a coordinated response. What has not worked well recently with the previous government, in my view, is the performative politics of a government blaming everybody else and pointing fingers. In that approach, to me, is not effective. It's the performative politics that I've put an end to with a government of service. My approach is different, which is to roll my sleeves up, get the relevant people around the table and fix the problems and meet the challenges that we have as a country. We did that with law enforcement and the police this afternoon. A similar approach with social media, which is not performative politics, which gets you nowhere, but the politics of service, which is to actually work together to address the challenges that we have and make sure that we keep the country safe and respect the values of our fellow citizens, which are about law enforcement, security and safety. Thank you all very much indeed.
That was Sir Keir Starmer there ending that press conference in which he said that the violence that followed the attack in Southport meant that its community had to suffer twice.
Right, well, if the comments can't get through, let me just live stream them. Kinda a way around it. Right, but this just shows you how fucked up the fucking YouTube. This is because we're in the war of information is for your mind, man. And that's weird now it's went through, even though I've been piling it into that fucking comment box for ages. And now it seems to be going through. Damn you, YouTube! Make me look like a crackpot conspiracy theorist. Does that one go through? Nope. 2 of them did, 1 of them didn't. So the one going through straight on the YouTubes isn't going through. The one going through OBS seemed to be getting through, but it's not getting through anymore. Oh no, hold on. There's 3 of them got through. I'm just getting confused now. There's too many of them. Anyway, I just wanted to share my paranoia.
He called the protesters a gang of thugs.
National
He said, make no mistake,
Disorder
whether in
Unit.
Southport,
Woohoo!
London or Hartlepool, these people are showing our country exactly who they are. He said it's not protest, it's not legitimate, it's crime. Let's bring in our political correspondent, Nick Eardley, who was listening to that, Nick. And one of the key things the Prime Minister mentioned was that National Violent Disorder Unit to be set up. Can you just tell us a bit more about what you understand by that?
A National Violent
Yeah, so
Disorder
it's supposed to be a unit that will deal with people travelling around the country to different protests in the same way as Keir Starmer put it, as football hooligans travelling
FBI.
around the country. So it will be able to share intelligence, technology like facial recognition technology.
Between different police forces and then amalgamate it and then like because they're in the federal law rather than the local law. This sounds great. I love this plan. This is great fun. Tell me again, Scottish man that needs a cough.
And will be able to issue criminal behaviour orders to try and stop people travelling around the country and try and identify where these protests may take place. I'm not completely sure at the moment how quickly that will get into action, but clearly a sign there from the Prime Minister that there is concern that this sort of thing that we've seen over the past 48 hours could continue and could spread. That was one of 3 things that I really picked out of that press conference.
The awakening for the monkey nuts.
The establishment of that unit. The other was some of the rhetoric the Prime Minister was using, clearly designed to be as condemnatory as possible, talking about these people being responsible for crime and violent disorder, saying that he doesn't consider this protest, but he considers these people thugs. Also, I thought really significant that he was talking about social media companies, saying that when crimes were committed on social media, they were still crimes, they were still being committed on those platforms. There was no real sense from the Prime Minister about what might happen in practice to deal with that, but that message was pretty clear, I thought, from Keir Starmer, that he is, 1, warning social media companies that they need to deal with this sort of thing, 2, trying to deliver a message to the public that this sort of behaviour is not going to be tolerated.
3 cow, Tommy, you're going to bring in the
setting up that unit that's
police
supposed
state
to make it easier for police to clamp down on this sort of behaviour.
Okay, Nick, for now, thank you very much. So just to recap, that press conference was in response to that unrest that was sparked by the death of 3 young girls in a knife attack at a Taylor Swift dance class in Southport.
And everybody's begging for it.
Teenager
and
who has been charged with murdering 3 young girls has now been named as Axel Maganwa Rudakubana
I had banana in it.
For the Crown Court in Liverpool this morning. You can keep up to date with all the...
And this is against procedure. They've released his name because they had to release their name to try and fucking release the pressure valve for the fucking monkey nuts who fucking don't understand that this dude was born in the UK for fucking a Christian household for Rwanda. Fucking idiots. Let's go and stone a fucking mosque. Get it. Got it. Dude, I'm out of here, man. Fuck this for a game of soldiers, man. And you get prisoner swap. Largest since the Cold War, yo. Get it. Got it. Good. Catchies on the other side, yo.
Clips, clips. And remember, citizens, always subscribe. Hit the notification bell as well. And $19.95 plus shipping and handling will keep you out of